All right, today in class we talked about sound vocabulary words. I forgot to record the video for it, so I'm just going to record it now to tell you about the sound. So find the poem in your poetry packet. It's called I Carry Your Heart With Me, I Carry It In. It's like that. It has stuff in it. It's by E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings was really famous for doing interesting stuff with the format and especially with grammar. So you'll see it and it looks like it's all wrong. The I's aren't capitalized. There's no spaces between punctuation. That's intentional. He does that all the time. In fact, when he would write his name, he wouldn't capitalize his name. So E.E. was in lowercase with no periods. They kind of changed it up, I think, in the Poetry Foundation just to make it fit with their format. But so find that poem, pause the video, read it through, and as we talk about the sound words, I'm going to have you find examples of it in the poem. All right. So you're back now. You've read the poem. Okay. So the first word, it's like in the middle of your poetry vocab terms. And the first word we're going to talk about is alliteration. So find alliteration. The definition is repetition of sounds at the beginning of words. This is usually a word that students have heard of before. These can be vowel sounds or they can be consonants, but as long as they're at the beginning of words. And they don't have to be in a row. They could be spaced out by a couple words, as long as they are in proximity to each other. So an example of this one might be at the end of that first stanza where it says, my dear, and whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. So dear, done, doing, darling. All of them start with D, so that's an example of alliteration. Okay, assonance is the next one. This is a repetition of vowel sounds. So the sounds in English, the vowel sounds sometimes change. These have to be vowel sounds that actually sound the same when you say them out loud. So an example that is also an example of alliteration is in the beginning of the third stanza where it says, nobody knows. That's alliteration because it's repeating that N sound, even though it's a K in knows. And then the O, you have that long O sound, nobody knows. That's an example of assonance. Deepest secret, that's also a sound of an example of assonance. Okay, I did not include this word, so you have to make another box in your poetry packet so that you can include this word. The word is consonance, C-O-N-S-O-N-A-N-C-E, consonance. And this is the repetition of consonant sounds. So whereas assonance is the repetition of vowels, consonance is the repetition of consonants. That I'm saying it different. Consonants versus consonants. Okay, maybe you heard that. So an example of consonants is, for example, when it says the deepest secret, it repeats the S sounds. So it doesn't have to be at the beginning of the sentence. It can be, in that case, the middle of the sentence, it doesn't have to be the beginning of words. In that case, it's at the end of deepest and then the beginning of secret, right? And that's a particular kind of consonants that we've talked about already. It's called sibilants because it's that S sound, but there's all kinds of consonants. Stars apart, that's another example. Okay, the next word is the next word is cacophony. Cacophony is a harsh, discordant mixture of sounds. Cacophony is a noun, so you have a cacophony. So I don't think there's an example of I carry your heart with me. The one example of it is the word sky. Sky kind of has a cacophony in it because do you hear how harsh that k sound is? If you had a lot of k sounds in a row, that creates that kind of cacophony. So it's words that kind of sound unpleasant to the ear. And then euphony is the opposite of that. Euphony are sounds that are harmonious and pleasing to the ear. And I think that this poem is full of euphony because you hear Let's see. Here is the root of the root and the bud of the bud. You hear how they're like kind of like popping, kind of round vowel sounds. Root, root of the root and bud of the bud. Like nothing is really like harsh there. The T is a little bit in root, but the bud of the bud especially is euphony right there. And then the last word is onomatopoeia. You probably learned about this one in elementary school. We don't have an example of onomatopoeia in the E.E. Cummings poem, but if you look at the poem that we talked about last time, the Emily Dickinson poem, we talked about how it says, I heard a fly buzz. Buzz is onomatopoeia. Words associated with what is named. That's the official definition. My favorite is sizzle. I don't know why, I just think it's so clever that we named the word sizzle and it sounds like a sizzle. Humans are weird. Okay, those are all the definitions that you need for today.